Hi, everybody. It's Mandy from the Infinite Me. I'm just on my own here tonight because Nat is not feeling very well. So decided just to still show up and do a talk today because that's what we've committed to doing, because that feels true for us. So welcome to the Infinite Me, where today, every day, we talk about topics to do about living infinitely. So how to remember who you truly are, how to wake up your powers, if you like, that you already have, that perhaps you've just forgotten what they're all about. So every day we have a chat in the moment about a topic that we usually pick out of our Infinite Lucky Dip bag, and we just talk in free flow about what's coming up for us around being an infinite being and living from that space. But today I thought I might do it a little bit different, the fact that I'm here on my own. So as I said, Nat's not feeling very well, so she just moved countries yesterday, so she's now in Belgium and she's feeling a little bit under the weather. So I thought that might just chat about what's actually just going on at the moment for both of us that's coming up. So before I jump into that, yesterday we talked about the myth of forgiveness, basically diving into the whole concept, if you like, of do we even need to forgive people or forgive ourselves for that matter as well. And what we came to the conclusion, I guess, with that is that it has to be a human-made concept of the ego, really, because to forgive someone is actually the assumption that there is actually something wrong that's happened, that somebody has done wrong by us, or we've perhaps let ourselves down in some way. And that can only be a judgment that's placed on that by the ego. So there is a lot of beliefs, if you like, around forgiveness, definitely in the religious context. That's definitely a concept that is pushed very hard, which I feel is kind of just to keep that power over the people, really, at the end of the day. And even that concept of self-forgiveness is still proposing that you're separate from your infinite self. So coming from where we stand at the Infinite Me, we believe that we're all infinite beings. We're all part of the one consciousness. So therefore, forgiveness doesn't really exist in our world. So check out that talk yesterday if that piques your interest. But as I said, today, just going to talk about where we're both at, Nat and I. So as some of you may know, we've been showing up each day and doing these live talks. So we've been going since the 1st of July. So we're now up to something like 60-something days of these chats. And behind the scenes, we're also working on a whole bunch of other things to do with this Infinite Me project that we want to bring to the world. So there's some pretty big stuff that we want to launch in probably a couple of weeks' time, which is just keeping a little bit under wraps still at the moment. But I think because it is such a big start with the feeling that's moving through Nat and I to do this launch, this thing that we're thinking about doing. It feels really big. It's quite a big idea. It's quite ambitious. It's way bigger than anything we've created before. It's definitely a new space for both of us. It's starting to create a bit of a movement, even just by doing these Facebook Lives, in terms of the engagement that we've had to date so far. And we haven't really done any marketing or paid ads or anything like that. So it's definitely just been organic and just sharing it with some friends. And also, so we're kind of really exploring all that, if you like, and sort of going, okay, we've got this really big idea that feels really true for us, and that's coming through us, which is everything we talk about here, about following this feeling that feels true for you in the moment. And so this definitely feels true for us, but then the head gets in the way. So the ego kind of wants to jump in and bring up all the stuff that would supposedly stop you from moving on that big idea. So I know for myself, I was just mentioning to Nat last night before we jumped on to do the chat about forgiveness, that I had been feeling a little bit off for a couple of days myself, like definitely my stomach, like my digestion's just been a bit weird kind of thing, just that. I'm not sick, but just that feeling like you might have something kind of coming on. And I just knew 100% that just that stomach churning feeling, if you like. So I just knew there was stuff kind of coming up around this, moving into this bigger space, if you like. And then, so I got the message tonight from Nat's partner, Jody, about her not feeling very well. And she's quite sick at the moment, in terms of she's been I've been under the weather for the last 24 hours. So, and yeah, she definitely feels like it's a purge at the moment. So I'm not surprised, because we've both been moving through these big energies right now. And the thing that's coming up for me today, which I really sat with a lot today, was this idea of creating a lot more inner space, which we've spoken about before. So this idea that if there is a big idea that wants to come into the world, like a bigger expression that's outside of your comfort zone or outside of your normal way of being, you have to create some space for that to actually come through into existence. Otherwise, you'll basically kill the idea. Like, your ego will kill the idea and you won't be able to pull it off. Not that there's an outcome you have to achieve by any means, but just that sense of free flowing of that feeling moving through you and letting it come into the world. You have to create a lot of space for that to actually exist, if you like. So I was definitely feeling into that, because I just knew I hadn't created enough inner space yet. And that's what this sort of churning feeling in my stomach was all about. And definitely all the ego games were coming up for me. So for me, that often looks like distractions to do with time. So I just had lots of little things popping up that were just taking up, time that I had to kind of spend addressing, because some of them were sort of semi-urgent kind of things, if you like. But I was just very aware of that coming up as well, because that's definitely been a pattern of mine in the past, of creating these little time sucks that just kind of divert your attention, if you like, and they seem urgent, but they take you away from the bigger, more important focus that feels true. And so I was noticing that sort of popping up, noticing lots of stories coming up around, money and needing to create income, and just about not stalling on our ideas, but just feeling a little bit confused around how to the best way to move forward. And some of that is just literally because we need to talk some stuff out a bit more, but some of it was an old pattern too, coming up around, if you feel confused, then you can't move forward because you don't know the right step to take. And so that was kind of showing me right now that that was definitely just an old pattern that it was coming up to try and get my attention, but I wasn't trying to give it any attention, if you like. It was sort of just noticing it was there, letting it be, and then asking what this was all about for me. So I did that this morning when I woke up. I was just sitting with, I didn't have the churning feeling as much this morning, I must admit. But I did just sit with this feeling of creating more space, if you like, of, okay, bringing presence to what's actually coming up right now. How do I create more space for this? And just asking some more empowering questions around what was actually going on. And so the thing that I got to after all that was needing to put the focus back on the why we're doing this. So if I can only speak for myself in terms of this, but the why that we want to bring this bigger project into the world. And I kind of lost focus a little bit in some ways, or the ego was trying to make me lose focus. That's what it felt like. It's a little bit of a battle that's been going on for a few days. And this is what happens, like when you, we've talked about this a lot in all our different talks at times, but when you do want to bring something into the world that does feel something outside of your comfort zone, or as I said, it's a newer expression, or you've been invited to do something that's just like going to expand your sphere of influence, or the energy that how you can impact in the world, and all your stuff comes up for you to see. And it's not necessarily there for you to engage, it's there for it's coming up to release. But it's just interesting how easy it is to engage in it when it does come up, because it feels really familiar and it feels really true on some level, because it does feel scary to the ego to kind of step out of your comfort zone and do something completely different. So last night I did an interview with a lady who is a relationship coach, and so it's going to be on a Tele Summit in October. So this is the first time I've actually done something like that before. So I had the interview last night, which got recorded, and I put the interview off for 24 hours because I was really feeling not ready the night before when it was due to come up. And I had this whole day of just like stuff coming up, like just in terms of time distractions. And I was really rushed that night. And I just thought, I feel very underprepared going into this interview. So I asked the lady if I could put the interview off for a day or two. So we ended up doing that last night, 24 hours later. And just the difference of sitting with that feeling that was coming up, and the stomach churning, and the and just sort of watching, if you like, the stories that wanted to go on, and just had to keep bringing my attention back to what is the message that I feel wants to come through me, to talk to her about. And so I literally just wrote down a few handful of notes to perhaps kind of refer to, but I didn't really want to be reading from notes, because I definitely just wanted to be in the flow with the conversation, like how we do all of our Infinite Me conversations here. So, because that's definitely tapping in then into the infinite space, rather than wanting to read from my knowledge-based, approach, if you like. But there's nothing wrong with putting some notes down too, because it did help just calm my mind a little bit and focus my attention somewhat. But I did find that on the actual interview, the lady asked me to kind of just, she gave me some leading questions, but then I basically just had to free flow for 10 minutes or so and give a little presentation on the particular topic. And it kind of felt like it went okay. Like, I mean, I was noticing going into my head at times and kind of going, okay, what do I say next? What do I say next? But I had to just keep bringing myself back into that present moment and just kind of go, no, you've got this, like, what wants to come through you, and whatever gets shared is the most perfect thing that needs to be shared. And so it felt like it flew by, and then next thing she was wrapping it up and we finished, the recorded interview. And then she sort of said off camera to him, she goes, oh, wow, that was really good. That was awesome. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay. Like, it kind of felt a bit weird to me. Like, I you're just talking into this camera and it's getting recorded and it's going to be sort of seen by a bunch of people soon. But it was just this weird, for me, it was definitely an expansion. It was a weird feeling of like expanding into a different level now. It's not something I've done before. And, I don't even have any attachment to where it's going to go. It was just definitely showing up for me as an opportunity. So I thought, oh, why not do that sort of thing? And then even with tonight, Nat sort of being sick, and then sort of saying, oh, do you want to go do this conversation on your own tonight? And I was kind of like going, at first my kind of first instinct was like, oh, but that feels really weird, just me going, doing this conversation in the moment. And it didn't feel true to sort of pull a ticket out of our little Infinite Lucky Dip bag. If you've seen that, we usually pull out a topic. We've got our little bag of notes here that we pull out a topic in the moment and we just talk about something. And that didn't really feel true tonight to do when I checked in, because I sort of thought, well, we've kind of co-created the things that are in that bag. And sometimes we pull out a topic that one of us has put in there and the other one doesn't know the context of that. And I mean, it's all in the moment. So obviously whatever's going to come through comes through on that topic, but it just didn't feel true when I did check in. And so I thought, no, it's more about where we're both at right now, because this is what happens on the consciousness journey when you're being called to something bigger. You have to create more space for it. So I'm just saying, Jodie's got a comment here. So Jodie's got, even the idea of being more seen can be overwhelming. I've often gone back and forth about whether it feels true for me to be up front or be behind the scenes. Yeah, definitely. I probably have been a more behind the scenes person throughout my life, definitely. And a lot of that was just tied into an identity of not wanting to be seen or visible, because therefore you might screw up and people would judge you. And coming from a perfectionistic background, that was like sheer hell for me to be seen. So yes, I totally get what you're talking about there, Jodie, about it being overwhelming, definitely. So but that's what happens, isn't it? We've been called to, if we want to live an infinite life and be true, like, be authentic with our expression and really express what is moving through us in the moment to do, then that usually involves us having to be seen on some level. And that could be just be seen by one person. It doesn't have to be a huge audience. But there is just that thing about being vulnerable and showing up regardless and sharing what's moving through for you without worrying about what's going to happen, how it's going to be received, because that's definitely where our ego mind wants to go, wants to worry about how this is going to be received, how are people hearing this, are they going to like what I've put out into the world, what are they going to think of me, maybe it's outside your normal way of being, and so therefore people are used to you showing up a certain way, and you start showing up differently, and that pushes their buttons sometimes. So all this stuff kind of goes on, at a million miles a second in our heads, and that stops us, like usually if we don't bring awareness to it. So that's what I was becoming very conscious of, this feeling of like, no, I'm being called to create a lot more space right now for this energy to move through me, because if I do want to put out into the world this idea that feels really true, and I know it feels true for Nat as well, if we do want to create this, then we both have to create the space for it, because otherwise it won't go anywhere. Not that it has to go somewhere, but we just have this true feeling that it's here to make a bigger impact. And there is a knowingness behind that. And so we're being called to create the space to bring that through. And so today I just spent a lot of time just sitting with the different beliefs, if you like, that I've had in the way for many, many years of bringing a lot of my creativity to the world. That's definitely been a struggle for me to probably believe. It doesn't even feel like a self-confidence sometimes. Some of that has definitely shown up as being just a lack of belief in my ability, but it almost feels like a separation that I created definitely as a child, which is a response to my childhood environment, if you like, that I definitely created like a fantasy type world where I lived in my imagination a lot of the time. And I don't mean like imaginary friends. It was more like I could see these fantastic creations in my mind, and I just knew I was here to bring some pretty big stuff into the world. But then I felt so kind of shut down, if you like, as a child. Like I definitely played the shy, quiet, toe the line, do everything perfect, good child. Nat was a lot more extroverted. Obviously we had the same parents, but like different expressions in life, and that was just our personalities of how we've come into this world. So Nat is a lot more extroverted, but I would say she's also struggled with the showing up in some ways, like very different to me, but I think it showed up differently in terms of our parents for her and how that affected her. So you carry those stories through with you through childhood. And this is what I was speaking to the relationship coach lady last night about, was these patterns that we've brought through from our childhood, and then we live with them now as if they're our present. So all the stories of, I can't speak up, I'm the one behind the scenes, I'm the shy one, I don't know how to express myself, or whatever these stories are that we create. We have to kind of then bring them into the light of truth to see if they're actually still true for us, because a lot of the time we've outgrown them, but our ego wants to tell us that we still are that way. And I used to even tell people, I'm really shy, and I don't like to be center of attention, or whatever phrase I used to kind of use. And I've had so many people tell me, this is maybe going back 5 or 10 years ago, people still say, I never would have thought that about you. I've never ever got that from you, that you were shy. You always feel really confident. And so I had to kind of pull myself up on that one, kind of going, I'm telling this story that I'm shy, but nobody else is seeing this part of me. And so I'm telling this story to myself. Like, so on some level, I'm still creating this barrier for myself that I'm shy and I can't show up and just be myself, and nobody else was having that experience of me. And yeah, it kind of just dawned on me one day. It's just like, wow, talk about like keeping the illusion going. And it was only in my own head that I'm creating that story for myself. So that's what I was actually sitting with this morning. I was like, what stories have I still got going on that are popping up now for me to see, so that I can create more space for this creativity that wants to come through, that feels really true. And so the stories for me were definitely around I can't just jump into something like this. Like I have to take care of all this other stuff as well. Like, so I've definitely had that story going on of being a caretaker, having to make sure everything else is done first before I can jump into the things that I want to do, whether that's, we house sit. So whether that's taking care of the property or the animals, or looking after my husband, or, cooking dinner, like all those different things that I've put on myself that I feel like I have to do first before I can feel ready to jump into a project. And of course, as we all know, that time never comes, because, we just always create distractions. So just got here, Louise has come here. Louise saying, I can so completely relate to that, Mandy. I think we all can definitely. We've all traveled this journey. We know what kind of stories that get in the way, don't we? So it's crazy. Yes. But I was sitting with that, the time distraction thing, and just going, okay, why am I not fully jumping into this? Like, this feels really, really true for me to do, and why am I not jumping into this? And it's often those things that are the biggest calling for us. That's where our biggest fears will show up too. So that's where our ego will play like full on to try and distract us from being our true self, because then the ego can't exist in that space when we start tapping into that feeling of being infinite and coming from that space, and the ego can't exist anymore. So that's what I was butting up against, if you like. It's just like the ego was really having a field day with my mind in the last couple of days and bringing up everything under the sun. And today I was just like, nope, not buying into the stories now. Now I'm just going to sit with the story, sit with what the feeling is that's coming up, and just give it some space to see what it's actually trying to tell me. And so it was definitely just around this feeling of, I know this is going to be something big that's moving through, and there's just some trepidation, if you like, of, I haven't done this before. I haven't shown up like this before. So there is a learning curve. It's kind of definitely a sense of just having to be okay with that, not knowing at the moment. And that's definitely been a game of mine to play, is needing to know all the time, needing to know before I make any move, needing to know before I make a decision, needing to know before I start a project. Anything that, collecting some details and some evidence around, I would definitely get stuck in that pattern. That is definitely part of my instinctual mode of operation, like through the Kolbe index that our friend Jennifer, Jenny Lincoln does, which Nat has touched on before. And it sort of gives you, it's meant to be 97% accurate based on your natural way of operating in the world. And I definitely come up as a fact finder, which is definitely collecting a lot of detail and research before I start on something. But then I have very good follow through on a project, and I'm very thorough, a very good attention to detail, and creative. And so that's definitely, I fit that bill. But then this is where your ego gets a hold of your strengths, if you like, and then turns them into a hindrance, where I can get so stuck in the detail sometimes that I just will not get started on something, because it has to be perfect before I get to start on something, or I need to know every single little outcome and how that's going to unfold, which is all just about mitigating failure, if you like, I guess, at the end of the day, of not wanting to be judged, or whatever that story is. I don't know. So don't really need to know. But it's that was coming up, and definitely around the money piece for me too. It's just like, wow, like what's the possibility with this? Could I even receive money for doing this kind of thing? Like, I definitely have probably struggled over the years with charging enough for my work that I do with design, and doing a lot of things for free and helping friends out and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, wow, this is sort of calling me up to a different whole level about receiving income for doing what I'm passionate about and what I'm good at and what I want to help the world with. Can I actually receive that? So it's kind of really sort of stretching me at the moment to kind of go, wow, okay, I have to move to a whole new level, and how I actually even relate to money and receiving money, because that is just another expression of, it's somebody's gratitude for you doing something of value for somebody, and that's all it is. But I had this story going of like, oh, people can't afford it, or I'm putting people out, which is kind of quite arrogant when I think about it, that I'm sort of putting my sort of viewpoint on somebody else, that they wouldn't be able to afford something, that's just kind of bizarre, the stories that the ego comes up with. So anyway, so that was what tonight wanted to just chat about. So it was just in the moment, this is where I'm at. I can't speak 100% for Nat, but I'm pretty sure she's got some similar stuff going on at the moment, based on the conversations that we have had, that we're definitely just being called to create this inner space right now. And so I don't know, like, how does this show up for you guys? Like, it's kind of, I think we're all get called at times to bigger ideas, bigger inspirations that want to move through us. And do you allow yourself the time to create that inner space, to sit in silence, to sit in presence, to sit in nature, just to allow whatever wants to come through you to come up and out, whether that's an emotion that needs to be released, without being judging it, letting go of an old story, like I was just sharing. Or maybe it is a learning curve. There is some new skills you actually have to learn. I know there's definitely some new stuff that I've been learning for sure, and that has as well, with some of the ideas we've got. Like, there's technologies we need to get our head around. There's definitely a lot of technology we need to get our head around to launch something, and just getting our messaging right and our story and all different things that we're kind of working on in the background, and how do you piece all these things together. And so there is this massive learning curve, and but being excited by that rather than letting it hold us back. So yeah, so what can you do to create more inner space, and how is that showing up for you? Like, what are you being called to bring forth in the world, and can you make it a priority? So that was probably the big message I got from today, actually sitting with stuff, is just like, why am I not making this a priority right now? Because this feels like the most truest thing in the world for me to do, and why am I not making it the priority? And not asking that from a ego point of view of like why. It was more just getting the truth from coming up of why am I putting other things in front of this? And it was literally just fear of the expansion that I'm being called into, because it feels really big, but it feels really true. So I'm leaning into that right now rather than leaning back, which is what I had been doing, and the resistance was coming up, and therefore my physical body was showing that up in sort of, tight neck and shoulders, and sort of churning stomach and different things like that, just the different physical symptoms. It's good to pay attention to what's happening in your body as well, because it always has the best wisdom for you. So anyway, thank you for joining tonight, and hopefully Nat will be feeling better tomorrow. Hopefully she'll get a good rest today. Well, it's today in her time in Belgium, so hopefully she'll get a good day's rest today and overnight, and we can catch up for another chat tomorrow. And if not, I guess I'll be here again tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. So, okay, thank you for joining, and we shall see you tomorrow. Bye.